Welcome to the Window Wisdom Podcast, your guide to replacement windows and more. All right, welcome back to the Window Wisdom Podcast. We're at episode number 40, and today we've got Kevin Fedati back with us. Kevin is our sales leader and always has a good story or two. So welcome back to the podcast, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this one. This will be fun.
Yeah, we are going to keep it pretty light today. Today we're going to be talking about some customer experiences, highlight some funny customer stories, some that are a little bit hard to believe, some touching stories that we've had, and also some challenges that we've had to overcome. So let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, Kevin, we're going to go back to the very beginning. I know I can, but can you remember your very first job here? The first time you went out on a presentation as a design consultant, and it was your job to build the value and sell those windows. Do you remember that?
I remember my very first one that didn't quite go the way that I thought it would. I had just exited probably 5-6 weeks of training with Ted and, got really excited, kind of felt like I was at the place where I could, kind of do this on my own. And I'll never forget when Ted called me, he said, "Buddy, I got your first lead for you. It's tonight at 5. And I was just so jacked and excited and ready to go. And the whole time I was driving, I was just kind of going over thoughts in my head and things like this, and got really excited. And I knocked on the door, and she answered the door, and she said, "Oh, baby," she said, "I'm too sick. I'm going to have to reschedule." And she closed the door. And I was like a sad, wet dog.
That was the first one.
That was my absolute first appointment.
Oh, man.
Luckily, I had a few more after that. I remember when I was kind of in the mix for sales, but still kind of training. I worked the showroom a lot and just kind of got my feet wet and would meet with homeowners as they came into our showroom and talk to them about the product. It was a good, opportunity to learn and kind of get in front of the homeowner. Well, one of the ones that I met with, I just felt really good about it. I felt like I had a good connection. I think you saw that, and you said, "Hey, why don't you run that lead?" And that made me feel good. And so I went out there, and it was a really good appointment. But I'll never forget when I first knocked on the door. Obviously, I met the homeowner. I was familiar with them, but their dog wasn't. And their dog was very excited to see me, and probably a little bit too excited. And I walked in the door, and in our line of business, you have to be good with dogs because we see dogs every day, and they sniff you and they lick you and they love you and they climb up in your lap. And it's just, you just have to be comfortable around dogs. Well, I grew up with dogs, and so I'm used to dogs, kind of sniffing. This was just a little dog, but it was a little bit older. So sniffing my feet, sniffing my legs, didn't think anything about it, was talking with the homeowner. All of a sudden I felt that my leg was wet. And my socks were wet.
So you literally got your feet wet on this one.
Yes, I did. I literally got my feet wet. I looked down, the dog had made a mess all over my leg. But that's okay. That's just part of it. That's what we see out there in the field.
Yeah. And I can remember the story that you shared with me earlier. I think one of the funniest things was actually the customer's reaction. What was it like? Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
It was, yeah. It wasn't very much. It was just kind of like maybe she just dealt with that a lot. So it was just kind of normal
for
her.
That before. Don't worry
she
about
offered me a clean paper towel, and we just kept talking about windows. So
how did that one turn out? Did it turn out good for you?
Yeah, we sold a small phase. I quoted, the whole project. I think it was like 70, but I think they moved forward with about 4. But, that was okay. That was a nice little sale to have under my belt.
It was one of the things I remember about my first appointment going out almost 25 years ago. I remember, like you, I studied all the material. I knew everything about, the company and the product and, just the whole process. I was ready to go through my entire presentation. I guess I built enough value. I get down to the end. I said, "How's that sound?" And they said, "Yeah, we'd like to move forward." And it just blew me away. I was like, really? What do I do now?
That's exactly right.
And that started a whole other thing that I had to figure out how to get it written up on paper and everything. But yeah, I remember that first one. It was like, Oh man, I don't know what to do. I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so that's always fun to kind of look back on
Oh
those.
yeah.
So, what's one of the most unbelievable stories that you've encountered? I can think of a couple of things that's happened in the business, throughout the years. But is there a story that sticks out that's one of those unbelievable moments, or just whoa?
Yeah. No, it's actually pretty recent. I want to say it's about 2 years ago. I got a call to go to a customer's house pretty close to our Warsaw office. I mean, it was right there on Hembry, probably 5 minutes away, pretty close. It was a small opportunity. This guy just needed to replace two windows in his garage, which is kind of rare because those are usually the windows that come last. And, I just met with the guy, what's going on, this, that, and the other. And he said, I need to replace these two wood windows because I have raccoons that are living in my garage. And at night, they're just eating the wood off of the windows and I can't catch them. And, he's a pretty interesting fellow, but he was trying to shoot him with his BB gun. They just kept escaping. It was like a cartoon, and he just could never get him. So he was interested in our fiberglass because he thought the raccoons probably weren't going to be too interested in how fiberglass tastes. So we ended up, moving forward with that. Just a small project, but you never know who you're going to help. Well, I remember that same guy lived in this was a really small home in Roswell, especially for Roswell, maybe 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom, very small. And I remember he was just always telling me that one day, he was going to be a very wealthy man. He was a little bit older and, I took him at his word and was like, well, I hope that for you, sir. He said, no, you don't understand. One day, I'm going to call you, I'm going to be a millionaire. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, he called me about 2 months ago, and he had just purchased a $1.7 million house in St. Malo. And so you take an opportunity where you have two little tiny windows in a garage. And, I think this guy maybe had some medical stuff happen, and anyways, he fell into this massive amount of money. And
Wow.
so he was good on his word. And I will admit that I wasn't a believer at first. I thought maybe this guy's a little bit older, and but sure enough, he's a multi millionaire now, living in the country club. And now we're looking at replacing every window and door in the house, and that's going to be well over. I think we're right around $130,000 for that
Wow.
project
And he
right
doesn't
now.
have to worry about the raccoons anymore,
No,
right?
I hope not.
In Georgia, you do have to worry about the wildlife, and you don't think of it so much, eating the windows, but termites for sure.
Mhm.
I can remember one time we were doing a job up in Bent Tree, up in the North Georgia mountains, and our install crew was up there working on a home, and they walked around the corner of the house just in time to see a bear climbing out of their truck that had just eaten their lunch for the day. So just remember that if we're ever working up in
Mhm.
the North Georgia mountains, roll up your windows, keep your
Mhm.
truck in a bear-proof cooler,
Yes.
because they will get in your
Yeah.
truck, and they will eat your
I
lunch.
was always paranoid about that. When I was up in the mountains, I'd open the front door and I'd kind of look around like I was about to cross the street, make sure there were no bears, and then go get my samples.
It happens. It happens. Well, sometimes, we do run into challenges with customers.
Mhm.
Not always the most fun to talk about, but sometimes there's something to learn from it. Especially, I think when we take the approach of, not the pity approach of, why me, Lord? Why is this happening to me? But we think about it, and truly, why me, Lord? What do you want me to learn from
Mm.
this opportunity, this challenge that you put in front of us? Has there been a customer moment that you can think of surrounding that maybe has made a mark on your career, or just the unique experience that sometimes the customers can bring?
Yeah, I remember I had, one customer that kind of impacted me, and it really kind of brought, when we talk about, and I think we've said it on this podcast before, but when we talk about how we walk homeowners through the process, we really focus on helping them. And this customer in particular kind of brought this whole word help to a different dimension for me. So he was an elderly guy. Lived in Douglasville, which is not a market we do a ton of work in, but every once in a while we'll get an opportunity down there. And he was older, kind of frail, kind of tired looking. And basically, he had told me, he was like, Kevin, look, I'm doing chemotherapy every day. And he was like, what I have is terminal, and I probably have about 6 months to live. And he said, what I'm doing right now is fixing my home. So when I pass on, I know that there's no left work to be done for my wife. And so I think what really brought a lot of value to him is our lifetime service warranty. Because I said, look, if she ever has a problem with the product, you call us and I'll make sure I get someone out here right away. She won't have to lift a finger. No trip charge, service charge, or labor charge. And I think that brought a lot of value to him. Well, right before the install, he did end up passing on. And so it was I think that it was cool that I was able to kind of fulfill my promise to him for his wife. And it kind of just brought to light what we really do for people.
Wow.
So that's one that, I mean, that was years and years. I mean, that was probably had to been my first year selling. I mean, gosh, probably 6 years ago, but on a pretty small project, but you just kind of carry that with you, because that you were able to help that homeowner.
Yeah, it's good to learn that early on in the career. And I can think of several instances where, there's been a death or something like that, associated with the project. Or, I remember a case recently where I think we have a podcast on this. Go back and listen to Mr. John Hogan's testimony where he lost his wife and never got a chance to meet his wife, but it was important to her to get the windows changed out in their house, and he really took that on as his mission and research to honor her with that project and to be involved in that process. Just a small part of us being able to fulfill that he was doing, in her honor and on her behalf, and obviously so he can enjoy it in his own home. But what that meant to him, that was pretty special.
No doubt.
And also remember, a customer who, was a big ambassador for our brand. He recognized the value that it brought to his home. He was kind of one of these guys that loved to nerd out on energy savings and spreadsheets and ROI and stuff, and he would tell everybody about us. And got to spend some time with him and do many phases of projects throughout the years. And the last phase that we did, he was actually no longer with us. He had passed away, and got to spend some time with him before he passed, which was very special. But then his wife come back and said, what, Vince wanted to finish this off with you guys, and what an honor and privilege that was to do
awesome.
that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, kind of shifting a little bit, let's talk about maybe some of our favorite customer experiences. Some of those that have just gone awesome, and we're appreciative. We're appreciative for every job that we're a part of, but just ones that have really stood out in our mind that have been, kind of extra special. Do you have any of those you'd like to share?
I think my favorite one was a job over in Roswell. I remember I met with this lady. She was just really fun. The kind of lady that you could just feel like you could talk to for hours, and just really, kind of peppy and just cheery and fun to talk with, and, very open. And one of the things that I'm proud of, and I think we're all proud of this, when we carry premium products, we're not shy about the fact that premium products are going to cost more than your starter products, right? So she was new to this idea of window replacement and how much is it going to cost and what kind of materials are out there. And I remember she looked at me and she was like, Kevin, you're not going to believe this, but someone gave me a quote, 55 windows for $40,000. Can you believe how much money that is? And I was like, yes, I can't believe how much money. So I was up front with her. I said, I don't want to waste your time. Just know that the product that we carry is premium, and I'm familiar with the company that, quoted you that. And we're just different ends of the spectrum. I said, but what would be fun is I am here and you have a design that you want that no one else can do. She had a very specific look, and that's one of the great things about our product is the grids are customizable, the colors are customizable. I said, I'm telling you right now, I might be one of the highest bids that you receive. But what would be fun for me is to at least be the guy that was able to make all your dreams come true, whether I earn your business or not. And I'm probably not at this point, but let's just have fun. Let's just quote it. Let's build the dream. She was like, well, I don't have anything but time. So yeah, let's do it. So we went room by room. And one of the things I'm really proud of is like how we organized the grids. When you look at this home, everything just flows. And, we built the whole thing and I got down to price and, I was probably 70. You got to think she was just kind of concerned about 40. So now we're at 70. And I remember her husband walked in from home and, his name was Kelly. And she said, Kelly, we have a problem. And he said, okay, what's that? She said, Kevin is the highest quote that we've received so far. The problem is I like him, his company, and the product better than anybody. And so we were able to help that customer. We did their entire home with our products. And it was just a fun journey. It was just kind of like a why not? Let's just do it. I had no intention of earning the business. I thought, hey, we might not be a good fit for this homeowner, but I'm fun. She's fun. Let's just have fun and design it. And, let's just do it. And, in the end, she was like, well, yeah, I want to use you guys. So that was a really cool experience for me from start to finish.
And I suppose everything turned out well.
Yes, which is great. And, actually we just had a customer last month, signed for a project and he did bronze windows and was super happy about it. And he said, hey, my HOA needs photos of jobs that you've done in my neighborhood. I said, oh, that's no problem. This lady is in that neighborhood. So she's got a corner home, beautiful home right there on the corner. So I sent him photos of her house and he was like, Kevin, that's the house that inspired me to replace my windows. And so I just thought that was, he wanted a similar look to what she had. He had no idea that she had our product in her house. So that was pretty cool that was able to earn us another sizable job for sure.
Yeah, that's fun. And, one of the things that just resonated with me as you were talking is just realizing the concept of building the dream, building a dream home for somebody. And you may not think of windows as being a huge part of that, but we know, being in the business, that it's a very big part of it. It can make or break a home. It's your light, it's your view, it's your accent, your design, your comfort. There's so many things involved in it. And I got a quick story that we were involved in a project, and this was actually a couple of years ago. This is a new construction project. We don't do a whole lot of new construction, but this was one of those situations where the homeowner was a previous contractor. He knew what he wanted. He was doing the research on the products. He wanted to put a better caliber in it. And unfortunately, it was a situation like you mentioned earlier where he had been diagnosed with an abdominal cancer, a rare cancer, and basically the doctor said, "Hey, if you're going to build a house, you need to get things in order right now."
Yeah.
And he chose us to go along with that journey. And we were able to complete this masterpiece of a home. It's in a neighborhood. You never know it was in a neighborhood. It's in 10 acres in the middle of Milton over a lake with, rock formations, a beautiful house, incorporated some historical architecture from a family barn that they had. I mean, just some really, really cool stuff. And to see them realize that dream. And then in the midst of this, to also see a man of very strong faith, get pretty much healed from a very rare procedure that he had done, that he's advocating about now. And then just being able to develop a close friendship with him along that journey. That was a real special customer. And we may have some footage, Mr. Gary Young as well, but he's been a special customer.
No doubt.
And there's been plenty of these throughout the years that you feel just as our number one core value states that this is more than windows and doors.
Mm-hmm.
You have that relationship where it's almost like you've known them forever, or
Yeah.
they're a friend, or you share just great stories and learning lessons with each other.
Yeah.
So
And really, not to bring it back to the product, but the product is so helpful because you can help really good people like this and you can lean on the product, knowing that, when you develop these relationships, you want to be sure that the product's going to stand up to your word, So to be able to know that we're installing windows and doors that are, kind of going to deliver on our promise is huge, because you're really helping some pretty magnificent folks, and you want them to enjoy the product long after your relationship with them is over.
yeah. And listen, we don't want to try to sit here from a position of telling everyone that we're a perfect company. We do a perfect job every time. The product's perfect, whatever. I mean, it's the best that we can do, and we feel that we can provide. But certainly, we navigate some tough situations sometimes, some tough customers. um, let's talk about that a little bit. Is there a time that stands out in your mind, where you've been able to help somebody through a situation, or where you just couldn't help them with a situation? Anything particular stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, there's always a kind of this like contractor homeowner relationship, right? So I think a lot of homeowner, when things start going south, and they do go south, we make mistakes all the time, but it's kind of how you resolve those mistakes. I think a lot of homeowners think that when problem comes up, and unfortunately this is most often the case, that the contractor and the homeowner are out to determine who's right. Where the contractor might not want to admit guilt and point at the homeowner and vice versa. And really what I found is everybody is willing to come to an agreement, right? As long as homeowners really feel like you're being fair with them, and it's like, look, let's make sure that this works out for me, and I definitely want to make sure it works out for you, and let's just talk about that journey. How about we do this? What if we did that? Usually when a homeowner is able to tell, like, oh, okay, good, like, this person's not out here to just come argue with me about how it is what it is, and I bought it and I signed the contract and I'm stuck with it.
Sure.
Like, they're actually coming out here. You'd be surprised how you can take people from, very high to very low pretty quickly. For what it's worth, I just had a call about 10 days ago. A guy told me, he was a little upset about some delays in his project that we didn't even see coming. It's just one of those things about dealing with manufacturers. Sometimes there's delays, especially when you deal with a manufacturer in North Dakota. You're an ice storm away from trucks not being able to get on the road to Georgia. So we had some delays. It not a fault of ours, not a fault of his, but he was very upset by it. It's fine. He has a reason to be upset. Um, but he was on the phone with me and I could hear his hand shaking. And he said, Kevin, I need you to listen to me. Can you hear me? And I said, yes, sir, I can hear you. No, can you hear me well? I said, yes, sir, I can hear you well. He said, just remember that I am your worst nightmare. And so I was like, hey, look, let's figure. I made some calls. Fortunate enough, we have good connections. We were able to pull some strings, got the install done. He was super appreciative. Like I said, that was 10 days ago. So we made things happen pretty quick. So, you're able to take a guy very upset
Pretty amped
to
up.
very appreciative. So, I would just say that and I really hope that there are many companies out there across the United States that are willing to work with contractors. And I think my advice as a homeowner is, if you can go in level-headed, you'd be surprised how more willing companies are to work with you because they want to help you.
Yeah. And just making the assumption that everybody's in it for the right reasons, and
Yeah.
they want to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to get over on anyone. And certainly we don't want to think that a customer is, putting us in a compromised position either. So, I can remember instances where somebody had a water leak and we chased that water leak time and time again, reinstalled the windows twice, added, super duper flashing systems, and finally got the builder of their structure. It was actually a cabin, and he pointed out that the water was actually coming from a rotted beam at the top of the home, that it just happened to be finding its way around
Wow.
the windows, and that was where it was rearing its ugly head. And we could have done anything in the world to that window application, but there was nothing that we could do without fixing the root cause, which was above the window in a structural beam that was taking on water. So those are the kind of things that are disappointed. Every once in a while you're going to run into a situation like that, but for the most part, I would say that we always are able to arrive at some type of resolution that
Hmm.
our customers are happy with. And I think our long-term ratings and reviews and our reputation kind of speaks for itself in that regard.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Well, as we wrap up here, do you have any final advice, or maybe some good advice that has been shared with you? Business or personal. Let's just try to end with a
Yeah, I
good
mean,
takeaway for somebody here.
I will say this in terms of funny stories and just kind of customer stories. Most of the time, the best stories happen in between appointments. So you got to think we're, kind of these outside design consultants, and we go from home to home, and typically you know, we cover the whole state, so you could spend a lot of time on the road every day, and you might be meeting at 2 to 3 homeowners. Well, you might have a project that takes you 30 minutes to start and finish. You might have a project that takes you 3 hours to start and finish. So as a company, we just try to average it. We assume that 2 hours is going to be enough allocated time for, a design consultant to walk the homeowner through it. Sometimes that's not the case, right? You could meet, with someone who's got a lot of questions and wants to do the spreadsheets and, know the ins and outs. That could be a 3.5 hour appointment. So I had 2 stories all around the same thing of rushing. My first one is actually pretty cool. I had just wrapped up a long appointment with a homeowner, and I got a call from a gentleman who was working as our inside sales guy. He said, "Kevin, where are you at right now?" I said, "Oh, I'm incoming. I just wrapped up an appointment. Sorry, I just got in my car." He was like, "Look, we just had a customer come in the showroom, wants to replace all his windows in his house, but he can only meet if someone can be there by noon, and you're really the only guy that has a shot to get there." It's like 11:30, so I had to get from coming to Milton in about 30 minutes, which is pretty tight. So I said, all right, all right, all right. I said, well, let me put it in my GPS. I'll head right that way. But I just got done a 3.5 hour appointment. So man, I was thirsty, dude. I was like, I have got to at least stop and get a water before I go to this next one. So I'm, probably not in the right mindset. I'm rushing. I'm thinking about, pulling over super quick, running into a gas station as quick as I can, grabbing a water, checking out, leaving. So I park. I always park next to the pump, even if I'm not getting gas. I don't know if that's a bad thing, but it's just easier to park next to the pump. And so I was on the right side of the pump. On the left side of the pump was this big, like electrician truck, like an F-250 that has all the cages on the back. So I just ran in front of it, and I did not look both ways. And there was this little tiny like Corolla coming around the corner, and he clipped me on my hip, and it sent me flying to the ground. Just enough, like, it wasn't like impactful. It was just enough to kind of knock you off balance. I fell, and I like popped right back. I'm in a hurry. I popped right back up, and this guy's looking at me. His eyes are like this big, like this guy's gonna sue me now. And I was like, I'm all right. And I ran in the gas station, grabbed my water. And what's cool story, this guy's been pretty impactful to our business. That appointment that I rushed to get to actually ended up being a high profile client, Heisman Trophy winner. And so I had a bruised hip the whole time. So no, but it was a cool story getting to and fro. And then very similar story. This is where it's all going to sound made up, but in the outside sales world, we need water. We're doing a lot of talking. We're outside. It's hot. So I'm constantly stopping at gas stations to get water. Well, one of the great things about Georgia, which is where we're at, is we have a very diverse community. I mean, in downtown Atlanta, we have International Boulevard, where there's all different country flags, and we have creeds and cultures, and we all live cohesively, And so there's always language barriers, and we're just open to it because we know it's always going to be there. So I'm rushing again to get water. This has got to be months and months later. I grab this water, I take it to the counter, and I could tell the guy notices that I'm rushing. I'm clearly in a hurry, and I'm clearly thirsty. And so he checks me out, and there's a language barrier, and I thought he looked at me and said, "The water's free." And I was like, wow, that is so nice. I was so thankful. I was like, man, that is so nice of you. You don't have to do that. Thank you. I grab my water. I start backing up. He's like, whoa, 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 water's free. I was like, I know it is, man. Thank you. I'm so appreciative. He turns the cash register around, and the total for the water was 103. But the way his accent was, I swore he was saying water free. 103. And so that was embarrassing, but we got it done.
No free water.
No
about
free
get
water.
Run over the gas station. No free water for you, man.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been fun to hear some of these fun experiences, and sometimes things change your perspective on it, and hopefully this gives people some lightheartedness of the behind the scenes of our job. I can tell you, I kind of wrap up with this. One of the most impactful piece of business advice that I'd ever received. And Jonathan and I were together. We were at a seminar, and we had just experienced our first customer that would not pay us. Now, even to this date, we very rarely ever have that issue, but the customer was unhappy with a door selection that they had made, and they clearly had the means to pay for it, and we were all upset, and we're like, what do we need to do? And this is early on. It was about $3,500. I mean, that was a lot. I mean, it still is a lot, but they refused to pay the balance on their door, and we were just agonizing over it. And we met a guy at this conference that we were at, and one of the things that he said to us at the time, he said, guys, you really need to stay focused on the positive in your business, meaning that situation was dragging us down. We ended up writing that off, and we didn't look back and look at where we are as a business today. And that's still a piece of advice that I can always draw back on, because sometimes you're going to get into adverse situations and challenging situations, and it may involve a homeowner, and but at the end of the day, if we can stay focused on the positive, that seems to take us a long way. So it's always been encouraging for me to stay focused on the positive, and certainly having you here on the podcast is a positive
Yes, sir.
thing.
Thank you.
So thank you for being with us, and hopefully if you've enjoyed the content, you can like or share, and check us out on the next Window Wisdom podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Window Wisdom podcast, brought to you by North Georgia Replacement Windows. Be sure to rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at NG Windows, and visit our website at ngwindows.com. So whether you're exploring replacement windows and doors, or you simply need someone to pray for you or your family, we're here for you. Until next time, take care, and we'll connect again on the Window Wisdom podcast.